Hey everyone, and welcome back. And I'm joined again by the wonderful Molly Suber Thorpe. How are you, Molly?
Hi, Tom. I'm doing really well. Just so happy to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us. I can see a bunch of people in the chat. I think this session is going to be really super interesting for the community as well. We're doing some hardcore Q&A. So this is essentially an hour of getting to pick Molly's brain, which is very valuable. Let me assure you, she's got a ton of experience, not just as a lettering artist, but as a creative business owner, and has achieved all kinds of things within her space. So, Molly, thank you for doing this, first of all, before we jump in.
Thank you, Tom. Yeah, I'm excited. Like, don't know what to expect. It's such a difference from like a planned presentation style session. So it'll be all mixed up.
There. I think there's a lot of our community that do really care about this stuff and find value in it. So I was explaining to Molly before we went live, we've been sourcing your questions from various places. So I've got some really good questions from the Design Cuts community lined up. Molly hasn't actually seen them all. So this is going to be really kind of spontaneous and organic in terms of her responses.
Good.
But yeah, I'll kick off then, Molly, if you're happy.
Totally. Let's dive in.
All right. So the team have wonderfully organized them into sections. And the first section of questions is all about pricing. The first one is, should I give discounts or work for free?
Should you give discounts or work for free? Okay, yeah, that's a really good one. So if you don't know me, I am a calligrapher and lettering artist, and my business that I've had for about 12 years as a freelancer started with client work almost exclusively. So that was before I was like making products and things like that. So my entire bread and butter, 100% of my income was for clients. And that started mostly with individuals and then evolved into working with more brands and then evolved into working in, products and book production. So in the beginning, right, when I was getting started, I think that's where a lot of calligraphers in their early years are now. So I'm going to focus and address on that, when to give discounts and if you should ever work for free there. So what I have to say about discounts is this. Frame your mentality, if you're ever thinking of giving a discount, as discounts are donations. Giving a discount is a donation of your time. Working for free is a full-blown donation of all of your time, right? But consider when someone asks you for a discount because your price is too high, or they tell you, I respect your pricing, but I don't have the budget for that. It's just important to really ask yourself what you're going to get out of that. Maybe that's as much as just a real sense of fulfillment that this job is going to be really meaningful to you. It'll create portfolio pieces that you're excited to shoot and, put up on your website. It's for a cause that is really near and dear to you. And so, donating some of your time is absolutely worth it. But if you can't come up with something that you're going to take away from the job too, in exchange for this donation of your time, I would say that you should leave discounts completely off the table. It's a bit of a privileged position to say that, especially in the beginning when you're just like looking for clients and building your client base. But you don't want to start off a career or a job being filled with any sense of resentment that I'm not getting paid what I'm worth for this. And like, oh, I'm sitting here working so hard on this job and I'm not even getting paid properly for it. So if you think always that giving a discount or working for free is a donation, that's where you start. And then second to that is that if you really just need the job and you feel like I have to take it because this person really, because I need the clients, then think about trying to change the job parameters or suggesting or gently educating the client about what goes into this project and suggesting ways that it could be adjusted so that the project parameters are less time consuming for you and they still get a product that is pretty close to what they want. Oh, and for free, if it's your own mom, yes, of course, for my mom, or my sister. Beyond that, no, unless it's for an organization and a cause that is extremely important for me.
Yeah. Great answers, and everyone that was on Matt's session before this, very similar thing was covered in terms of don't reduce the price, reduce the scope, which I think is essentially what you're saying when it comes to discount.
Totally. In a very specific example, because I know we have a lot of calligraphers watching, someone asks you to do an entire wedding invitation in calligraphy, and they can't meet your budget. That's a super time-consuming job. That's a really difficult thing to do, and a lot of people kind of balk at what the price for that is. So you can come back at them and say, what if I just do like the key words on there in calligraphy, and we do the rest in a digital typeface, right? Like that'll save you a lot of time. They'll still get a beautiful product out of it. So that kind of creative thinking about, the job parameters, that can be really helpful.
Love it. This might be a bit contentious. I don't hate free work. I hate it when it's on the client's terms, but I don't hate it when it's on your terms. And personally, I think there's a big distinction. So if you're doing it as a strategic move to open a door, find an opportunity, or as a value trade where you might not get money back, but you get something else back, that for me is okay when it's part of your strategy. It's when the client comes to you with an expectation and says, do this for free, or please do this for free, or can you do this for free? That for me sucks. But personally speaking, I do stuff all the time, even now for free, in terms of like giving away consultancy hours and all kinds of things, because it might help build a relationship or open up an opportunity or, position me as a person of value. How do you feel about that?
I totally agree. And I think, yes, I should absolutely add that I think when I say that it's about getting something in exchange, that can absolutely be as like personal growth or career growth. It can be because you just genuinely really want to. I mean, that's a good enough answer, right? It's just that's, per, your point about it not being on the client's terms. Don't give the discount or do it for free just because the person says, but I really want this thing, this product, this design, and I just can't pay your rate. That emotional pricing situation where you think, I want to give a discount because I feel bad, that's where you get into messy territory and you'll start feeling resentment. But yeah, if you look inside yourself and it feels really good, 100%. And I do that too, donate my time for things, but I consider that more usually in like the category of causes that mean a lot, which doesn't have to mean like a big political or social thing. It can be like a personal one-on-one connection that means a lot to me.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. So question number 2, these are good questions as well. I'm quite impressed. How do I deal with clients who say I'm too expensive?
Right. Okay. So first of all, in my field, in calligraphy and lettering, the majority of individual clients who are going to come to hire me have never hired a calligrapher before. More often than not, they've never worked with a calligrapher. So it's very common that clients really just don't know the price of your work and the amount of work that goes into it and the amount of skill required to do that job. So when a client pushes back against your pricing and says, well, that's way more than I thought it was going to be, can you lower the price? That's not a tricky client. I consider that actually a pretty normal scenario that every creative freelancer should try to kind of figure out how they're going to address when it occurs, not if, when. So what I like to do is just think about gently educating clients. This works a lot of the time. If you respond to someone and you just say, let me just tell you a little bit more about what goes into this personal project that you're hiring me for. And like, let me just tell you a little bit about what you're going to get here and the personal attention. That often goes a really long way. People very often don't realize that I don't just pick up a pen and paper and dash something off and scan it and send it to them. A lot of thought and drafts go into it. Edit rounds come around. I'm there to answer their emails when they want. So people realize I'm getting something really personal. This person is really skilled and professional. And they've come back to me with like really good justification of their price. So that often works. If the person starts to get like rude to you, which inevitably, unfortunately does happen, I can't believe that you're charging that rate. Like, are you actually joking? I just walk away. I don't even respond.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's fair. I think there's a lot of information in the industry right now that is trying to like side with the designer, which I understand. I am one by trade originally. And it's kind of saying, well, if the client ever messes up a tool or quibbles a price, even in a gentle way, you should tell them they're wrong and walk away and respect yourself. And like it's quite aggressive, some of the advice I see. And, one of the reasons we love you, Molly, and love having you on is you align with us in terms of being a bit more respectful and gentle and kind and empathetic with your clients and with your community. And I think that's so important, really, to handle things the appropriate way instead of, put yourself on a pedestal and embarrass the client for being so idiotic to question you. Like, that's not what it's about, is it?
Well, yeah, I've had people write me some of the rudest messages. So don't get me wrong. I've had people say the most absurd things. The best was like, "Oh, I guess you're an artist, so you think you can charge whatever you want." That was a classic. I never responded to him. But like I said, the average person, they don't necessarily know what goes into your job. Why would they?
Mm-hmm.
Why would they? There are lots of things that I don't know what goes into that work, and I genuinely don't know what the rate would be for that item. And sometimes I might be surprised that something costs so much, and it helps me to learn why it costs what it costs.
Yeah, totally true. So we moved house recently. I questioned the price for the home surveyors, like the buying report survey. And I think I'd heard a wrong price from a friend ages ago. So I had that in my head, and it was about like maybe 15 or 20% of what the typical market rate is. Okay. So I said to the company, surely that's wrong. I thought it's this much. And they had to educate me, like, I don't know where you got your information, but that's wrong. And here's what it is. And here's why. And I didn't judge them for that. I was like, oh, okay, I know better. And, we use them.
Right. And that's the other thing, is that you couldn't have done that by yourself. That's not your job. That's why you went to an expert to do that for you. And if someone can do the calligraphy or the lettering for their own logo or wedding invitation themselves, they'd be doing it themselves. So they've come to you because you are the expert, and they recognize that enough to reach out to you and ask you to be the expert to do that for them. So yeah, more times than not, they'll respect your answer. Even if they still can't afford you, they might come back and say, wow, I fully understand why it costs that much. Unfortunately, it's not my budget, but thanks.
Which is fine. Yeah.
Totally.
Then you're not the right fit. Okay. Next question is commercial versus personal projects. Why does a logo, for example, cost more than a wedding invite or something like that?
Right. That's a very good question. And it's one that I feel really passionate about. So to define the difference between like a personal and a commercial job in design and lettering, that would be a personal job would be one that's done for a client that is going to be used exclusively and only for that client. That client is never going to profit from your work. So a commercial job is one where the client will take the end result of your design and they will earn income or in some way prestige from that. A logo is the best, most quintessential example of that. When a designer creates a logo for a company, that company is, of course, using it as the face of their brand. So they're forever using your design to increase and boost the influence and the income of their company. And they're never really going to credit you for it, right? That's a specific thing with a logo. You never see a logo with a little asterisk that down at the bottom says designed by, right? So, right, like, so a logo is this great example of a design that can be created for a brand that earns money for the brand, where the designer very rarely gets credit unless someone specifically looks into it to try to figure out who made it. And so for that particular reason, a premium should be charged by the designer for the right for the client to be able to use that design indefinitely to earn income from, and the right to not be credited on a design that's going to be front-facing to the world, used, in a marketing way. So even though a logo design may take you as long in terms of hours to create as a wedding invitation or a hand-lettered tattoo design, the destined use of those designs is completely different. And the licensed rights to those designs are also completely different. So even though this isn't like a question about copyright, we as designers, we own our copyright 100% by default. So when you make a tattoo design for someone, let's say the word love, right? You are licensing it to them to use on their body as a tattoo. If they turned around and created a company called Love Soaps and used the design you made for them that said love in their logo, that would be breach of your copyright. That's They're not allowed to do that, right? Unless they pay you the extra amount. And that's why the premium has to be charged, because that destined use and the licensed rights, the added rights that they get to use your design.
Really good answer, Molly. And this is why really the best approach is price the client and price the project. Mm-hmm. You shouldn't just say, I'm always going to charge X amount for this type of work, because guess what? If Nike came to me and said, can you redesign our swoosh logo? Absolutely. Versus like a mom and pop store down the road, it's going to be completely different order of magnitude and pressure on each of those projects and impact.
Absolutely. And just, so that those watching know, in the professional licensing rights world, these things are discussed to the absolute most minute detail. Not just, like, will the design be used indefinitely for a logo? Yes, you want to be able to, no expiration of when you can use it, but also where will you use it? Do you want the rights to use it on a billboard, in television media, just online media, social media, in print, in books, on a book cover? These kinds of things are so specifically hammered out in advance and adjust the price tag accordingly. So you might feel like you're just this, sole lettering artist, and why would I necessarily charge more just because the company is bigger? This is how it works in like the real big world of like licensing deal contracts. So it's totally legitimate to take the destined use and the destined audience, whether it's international versus local, for example, into account in your pricing.
Yeah, for sure. I can see a few questions coming in. We are going to try and get through all of the questions. As I said at the start, we've got a few that we've kind of gathered from the community ahead of this session. So I'm going to try and fire through these with Molly, and then we're going to get to all of the questions that are flying in right now. So I'm going to talk less, basically, Molly. I get so passionate about this. I'm like, just want to discuss it all with you. Sure. But yeah, great answers so far. Thank you. Marketing, we got asked about portfolio tips. So for someone just starting out, how do they build the strongest portfolio?
Right. Good question. Let me start by, the cliche, quality over quantity. I think that, when you're starting out, before you've worked with a lot of clients, a lot of what's going to be in your portfolio is personal work. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. Even some of the top-notch designers in the world, if they've created a personal project for themselves that's not for a paid client, they'll put that in their portfolio. It's the quality of work and not necessarily who it was made for that should dictate whether it's in your portfolio. But, and this is a sad reality, but it's a reality. Your portfolio should be beautifully presented. You should have a website. I mean, just getting into nitty gritty, you should have a website, not just an Instagram, if your goal is to get paid clients through your hand lettering. And on your website versus your social media portfolio, on your website portfolio, you really should curate your work to have a cohesive looking aesthetic and not include anything that is poorly presented. And this sucks, and I really do hate this reality. But if someone goes to a website and they see 5 beautiful things and then one photo that's pretty poorly taken or pretty badly presented, they'll remember that bad thing. I wish that weren't true, but it's true, right? So it's better.
That's how humans work.
Yes. So it's better to just wow someone and not have a negative thought go through their head, but have only 6 items, 6 big photos in that portfolio, than to have 10 photos where some of them, are going to make people say, well, I can see that the product is probably good, but like that photo isn't great, or, this doesn't match the rest. So you have to really curate, and that can be so hard. And especially in the beginning, I mean, I remember I sought the feedback of people I really respected. And I said, can you take a look at my portfolio and just tell me if you think something doesn't match or if the quality of the presentation isn't top notch? And I would take their feedback, and I say this about, all feedback, decide if you agree and then go about it. And, because sometimes they'll point out things you didn't see, or you'll see, oh, I can see from that person's eyes that they were right. I'll probably will take their suggestion. But sometimes you will disagree with them. It's an aesthetic, personal preference, and then you don't have to go with their advice. But yeah.
Great tip. Again, as well, I'm a huge personal believer in mock-ups. And to the point, I know we sell some at Design Cuts, but personally, I don't care if you could go away from the session and go find some free mock-ups and you don't want to invest in them. It doesn't matter. Just use mock-ups, educate yourself, because we don't all have access to like a professional photo shoot. So just starting to explore the world of mock-ups is really beneficial to show your work off in a professional, consistent light.
I want to add to that. Yes. You know that phrase that I don't know. Well, okay. In the States, there's this phrase like dress for the job you want, not the job you have. This concept that present your face to the world for the client that you want to draw in, not the clients you have. And mock-ups are what can do that for you. You've never had a packaging design job, but you want to be able to design packaging. Learn how to create mock-ups of your designs on packaging so that you can present to people images of your work on packaging. Very good point.
Yeah, love that. Molly, as soon as you said dress for the job you want, not the job you have, I guess that explains why I have this lying around, this sort of thing.
Does.
Yeah, sure.
Yes. Yes, I've seen you wear that in your Insta stories. And
it's next to me. You know, it's becoming commonplace. Cool. This is an interesting question. How do you deal with creative burnout? And the reason I find this interesting, I talk to a lot of friends about this. We've done a lot of podcast content about this. I would say you have like you're quite like a together person from what I can ascertain, more so than me. I tend to be like emotional and that typical kind of creative stereotype and highs and lows and everything in between. You always seem very together and organized and meticulous. Does that mean you get burnout or do you avoid it?
Ooh, it's a huge compliment that you would say that. Okay, where do I even begin with that? It has taken years of discipline for me, I guess, to present this face that I am very put together. I am very put together now, but I do have burnout. I have massive burnout. I am still not good. No, I'm taking that back, starting again. I have realized that my way of working is in waves, and I now go with it. That's what I'm going to say. I'm not even going to criticize myself.
When you're tired, you rest. When you're inspired, you work, and you just kind of flow with it.
Yes. So I have been able over the years, I'm very lucky, but I really decided early on that what I wanted wasn't to do only client work. I wanted to be able to write books, set my own schedule even more and my own calendar. And so that meant going into the world of writing books and creating products with client work sprinkled in. And so as a result of that, I am able to focus often on these really big projects at a time. And that would be like at the peak of these waves. And then when I'm done, I am done. Like I take time off. You were asking that question and I was thinking back to when I wrote my first book and I was up for 4 months working. I've never worked like that in my entire life. And my deadline was crazy. And I didn't even realize what a level of burnout I was about to experience because this was what taught me my lesson. I didn't understand what pushing myself like that meant. So I hit submit on the night before that it was due. I submitted it to my publisher and I sat there in front of my computer and I decided, what am I going to do now? I'm going to take a shower. So I walked into the bathroom, I take a shower, and I just burst into hysterical sobs. For like 20 minutes, I was bawling my eyes out. Not out of sadness, but out of like relief. It's that sigh of relief that had been building in me for months. And I realized like, okay, I need to look at myself and my workflow and my methods a little bit closer here and at least recognize when this is coming. And since then in my career, I've had that happen to me more than once, but now I know that it's coming and I kind of do it almost on purpose because I can't get into a project sort of halfway 8 hours a day. Unfortunately, that's not how I personally function and I don't like it that way. So yes, I experience burnout. And in that period, I try to not look at social media much. I try to not let myself start to feel down that I'm not working. I'm really good at guilting myself that I'm not doing more work. And I just really try to rejuvenate my creative juices through things that inspire me instead of, maybe give me imposter syndrome. So like reading and
Great answer. One of the takeaways from that answer, which I can totally relate with, is burnout's kind of like dehydration. By the time you're thirsty, it's too late. You're already dehydrated.
Yeah.
And so I think what I used to do as well, I would hit burnout and then I'd start, okay, I need self-care and I need to turn that around and pull myself out of it. But it's so much harder because you've already crashed. So what I'll do now is I'll see little red flags, right? It hasn't hit yet, but it's like starting to wane. And at that point, I start trying to fix it.
Yeah.
And sometimes I still burn out, but not as badly. And other times I kind of just sidestep it altogether because I got there early enough. And I think that's really important.
That is exactly right. Those red flags. And it took me having that massive crash to learn in retrospect what those red flags were and what I should have seen. And, I've been doing this 12 years now. I know a lot better. I would never expect, that in the beginning I would understand how to be a freelancer with like perfect scheduling or something.
We learn from these things. And obviously there's some kind of key moments. If you find yourself sobbing in the shower, it's probably a good sign that something has to change moving forward.
Yeah, or honestly, that you're just really freaking proud of yourself and you deserve a really long break. Because that's how it was for me. You're 100% right. It's one or the other. Either you just accomplished this thing and now you need to just take a break. Or you're pushing yourself too hard and this is bad.
Love it. I'm really enjoying this chat, actually. It's very honest. So I appreciate you being so candid about these things. I think it's really helpful for the design cutters watching. Next question, let's change gear. So what do you find are some of the most beneficial uses of your time when it comes to growing your creative business, marketing, etc.? Where are you getting the most return?
Practice.
Okay.
So, it's a really good question. I have to kind of think through it, and I guess I could try to categorize it a little bit. But my gut answer there is honing my craft. When I'm learning or practicing, I should say, when I'm practicing and I'm doing work for myself, I very often end up making some of the work that I'm most proud of, that I'm happiest with. And then for someone who's a visual artist who needs to have visuals to do my marketing in my portfolio, in my social media, those inform that marketing. Basically, I can't do any promotion whatsoever without the images to back it up. And so it all comes down to what inspires me and helps me create those images. And it's less so finding clients and getting jobs and portfolio pieces from them as it is me sitting down quietly and letting myself make ugly work and just feeling really vulnerable in making imperfect, not trying to make finished products, because that's what usually leads me to make finished products that I'm really happy with, when I take the pressure kind of off of myself and I just practice and I play. That's a better word. Playing around, practicing and playing with my art. Yeah.
And I'm guessing the reason you're not talking about going and getting clients is because that happens more organically in an inbound capacity. So they're coming to you. And so the best way you can keep them coming to you is by putting out great work and positioning that work in the right way.
Yeah. Your question was really more about marketing, wasn't it?
No, but it's fine. If that's the honest answer, that makes complete sense. You're building out content and a fantastic portfolio, which is creating a gravitational pull to bring the clients to you.
Yeah. I will go back to earlier in my career, though, then to answer that the rest of the way, because it wasn't always like that. I have been able to build a client base and have clients come to me. And that was the awesome turning point in my career when I was able to stop reaching out so much and have more people come to me instead of me trying to find them. And that's a really cool moment that I think lots of freelancers are really striving for. So just keep going and, try to get there. But before. So
exactly. For all the live people who are like, well, I like playing, I like lettering and it's fun, but I'm not getting anything coming in. Yeah. What would you say?
Right. So, I'm a massive introvert, right? I'm someone who's positioned well to be staying at home, but that also means that, when I was living, outside of COVID, whatever, where I was living, there were networking events and there were things that I could have done in person and socially. And that was never my thing. So the way that I developed my technique for finding clients was, first of all, this is a very precise bit of advice, but I have business cards. I believe that business cards are super important, physical, beautiful business cards. And so I would go around town and I would be at a cafe by myself, and I would see that they had these chalkboard signs that I would think like I could probably do those better. And I would ask for the manager and if I could give her my card and, things like that. Finding the clients I would want to work with and then telling them about me. Not even reaching out in a marketing way, always like, please let me work for you and making these wedding invitations. But often it would be like a stationery shop. I would drop by and I would say, I always love the stationery that you do. I wanted to like leave you with this sample pack of my work. Not, so much like I need work and, here's my price sheet and all of that. Just start with showing people your work. Because if they like it, then they'll want to hire you and then they'll ask about your prices. It's a business completely centered around visuals and personal connection. So yeah, that's what I would do. And now in the internet world and the lockdown world, emailing in that same way, but emailing in or physical mail as well. How awesome is it to get like a packet of
if you're a letterer, make it look nice.
Totally, like the stationery company that you would dream to address the envelopes for their client, and you send them a packet of beautifully packaged samples with a note just about how much you've been following them for years and you love their work, whatever it may be. Personalize that outreach.
Love that. Do you know Pascribe on Instagram, Paul?
Yes.
So it's just behind that curtain, but I've got like a handwritten letter from him. Mm-hmm. And I've seen him do this with people in his network. And I think he might do it as well with like potential clients. Yeah. And when I got that in the mail, I was like, oh, it's like this precious thing because it was so beautifully done, the address and everything, and it stands out. And so, in a sea of like junk that we get in our letterboxes and throw straight in the trash, if you get something like that, I think it can cut through the noise in a really interesting way. And I would imagine 99% of letterers are not doing that.
Maybe. I mean, I think it's really daunting and intimidating, and it's especially early in your career, it's easy to convince yourself that it will be no good. That these stationery companies surely know better, calligraphers and things like that. But let me just tell you, a lot of these places are about personal connection, and your work is probably a lot. We're always more critical of ourselves, so you have to get your name out there, and it can't just be through Instagram. A lot of the clients who want to find you may find you through Instagram, but if you're looking more for companies and brands, they don't have the time always to be browsing through Instagram. Sometimes they do, and you'll luck out. But sometimes you need to put yourself in front of them instead of
love that
curating your feed for them to find you.
Yeah, go to the client. Don't wait for them to come to you, especially at the start.
Yeah.
Just a very quick question from me. Someone else before this session in our community asked about your thoughts on niching with your services and essentially how you position yourself in your market. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a good question because we have to recognize that we can't do everything. And that is a really obvious and yet not obvious thing that we need to remind ourselves of. Gosh, this is very uncreative, but it kind of comes back to my last answer about making your work. So in fact, Tom, you and I were kind of talking about this, that when you examine your own skill set, examining what you most love to do, what would you like to do 8 hours a day, every day, if you could? What in your lettering?
I do it.
We're so lucky. Seriously,
yeah.
I just can't get over it. It's so lucky. But yes, so that's what you have to ask yourself. And niching in the lettering community can mean that you do a lot more work in branding for companies and creating logos, or it can be specifically the wedding invitation niche. There are niches, actually really divergent niches within the calligraphy and lettering arts community. You could be a teacher primarily, you could make products. So dabble in some of those. Don't just do what necessarily has come to you with the most client work. That's what I did for a long time. It's totally understandable. I was getting a lot of envelope addressing jobs and I just really got burnt out from it. I didn't enjoy it. And I said, what I would love to do all the time is be writing about this and answering questions about this and creating like big projects about this, not little projects here and there every week changing. And so I pivoted to that. But it takes a bit of time, but it takes self-examination of what you really want to do.
Yeah, I think that self-examination is so key because, for example, we had Matt, and he almost didn't niche entirely so they could have a wide array of services. I've seen that with my friend Mike Jander as well. They were a kind of full stack agency, but it's that introspection to figure out: do I want to kind of build out an agency and offer a wide array of services? Do I want to go niche down a path? And both work. That's the beauty, right? You need to decide what's the right fit for you.
Right.
Okay. Johannes asks, how is your approach if a potential client tries to tone down your work or the steps? So they're kind of saying like, no, we don't need all of this work. Basically, you have a way of working, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you have a methodology and a process you go through, and it's probably very thorough and refined over years. So if a client comes in and tries to stamp on that and like, that seems a bit superfluous and unnecessary. Okay. Why don't you cut out all that and just do that? And they're calling their shots. That's a pretty horrible situation, right? How would you deal with that?
Now, today in my career, I would just take a polite pass on that project.
Yeah.
That's that's from a point of privilege that I can say no to a project. So it's a tough one. To give like a real world example of that, just, for example, I would frequently get asked by people, I need a logo, but I don't want like 50 different iterations. Like just make it kind of look like this style and I'm sure it'll be fine. It'll be great. And, just send it to me and I know it's going to be great. And I'll just add on the subtitle myself and I'll do my own colors. Like all I need is the calligraphy part. And there was a period that I did take on jobs like that earlier in my career because I needed the money and the clients. Like, there's no shame in saying that, right? I needed the money and the clients for that. So
thank you for saying that. This comes back to something I was saying earlier. Like, there's a lot of people on Instagram with 200 followers and no real career success who are like speaking like it's the gospel, right? It's like, if a client does anything you don't like, walk away. It's like, well, maybe you've got a family to feed and you're more early in your career and you need the money. And there is no shame in that. I completely agree.
Of course, there is no shame in taking on any type of job. This just comes down to how you want to feel about yourself and build your business. So if you can, like now, if someone says that, I say, that's just not the way I work. This is my starting price for a logo design like yours. And this is the process involved. Sounds like we aren't a good fit. But there was a time, absolutely, I took on jobs like that, right, where people just wanted the calligraphy and then they would do all the rest of the designing, whatever. And I didn't enjoy it. It didn't turn into portfolio pieces. And I was able to pivot away from it. I just knew, okay, Molly, that's your goal, to not keep doing jobs like that.
Mm-hmm. So a very quick example on that front from my earlier freelance career, but towards the end of it, and I never got to like crazy heights, but I got to a kind of paid my way through college and a bit more comfortable kind of level. By the end of it, I was known as like the conversions guy with web design. So I would redesign your website and you'd make 50 to 100% more money overnight with the new iteration. But I wasn't a coder. I couldn't be bothered to go and get freelancers to code it. So I would actually just give the client a PSD, believe it or not, and they'd have to go and get it coded themselves because that suited me. Yeah. And I'd whip these up very quickly because I had enough experience to do that, but I could charge thousands and thousands for essentially a Photoshop file. Mm-hmm. So that felt very good. Was it always like that? Hell no. Like in the early days, one of my clients, I remember, I wasn't charging a flat rate. I charged by the hour, and they would get me to go around their house, and the two founders, one would sit there and one would sit there, and they would watch me and be like, now move that there. Okay. I'll change that. And I would sit and do it because I was broke and I was young. And I was like, well, I need the money. And it was deeply unpleasant. And I pretty quickly learned I don't want clients like that. And I had to adjust how I work. But I learned and I paid my dues, and it helped pay the bills at that younger age. And I'm not ashamed of that. And equally, I couldn't have walked in and commanded their respect like I might have been able to do further down my career because I didn't have the experience.
100,000%. I mean, you live, you learn. I mean, and also, by the way, and it's really hard for me, right? I'm a very non-confrontational person. You can always quit a job. you can always
Yeah.
end a job if it really sucks too. So I'm not saying like, oh, if a job gives you terrible red flags up front, just take it and see, because you can always quit. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying like, if you're really, if a job just goes completely haywire and south, you don't have to stay with that job. Get a proper contract up front of what happens if you or the client end the job, or if the terms change. Always your contract up front should say, if the terms that I've just listed here change, I either, fill in the blank, I don't have to continue, or the price changes, or the deadline changes, or whatever it may be. Give yourself an out in writing in advance, and you live, you learn. You'll have bad jobs.
You will. This is a really good segue into the second most uploaded question, actually, from Tio, who asks, okay, here's a big one. Okay. What was the big error you made from which you actually learned the most in retrospect? It's a great question.
The biggest error that I made from which I learned the most in retrospect. Probably like in 2 hours, I'll think of an even better answer here. But, let's see.
Do you want me to give a quick one while you think?
Yeah, please get us.
Mine has to be around delegation and self-care, because when I started Design Cuts, I thought I was Steve Jobs, where I was like, no one can do it as well as me. I'm not going to give up a single tiny job. And I put myself in the hospital, as many people watching will know. And that was terrible, right? Like really bad experience. But the worst experiences in your life teach you how to do things better. So I came out the other side and learned, got to build a team out. And now we got a team of over 20 incredible people behind the scenes. But that only came from such a bad lesson being learned and such a terrible experience that it forced my hand to stop being an idiot and behave in the right way, and scale out a team and actually trust other people and delegate.
Good answer. I think, okay, so I have an answer, but who knows if it's like the biggest error, but this was a very educational one for me. Taking on a project for many projects, for the promise of promotion and exposure. Right? This is something people talk about a lot, right? And sort of like how I said before, like if you need the job and you need the money, if you need the exposure, sometimes you can take on a job for exposure. That's okay, right? Like again, it goes back to my answer about free work. If you're gonna get something out of it, even if that's some exposure and it's worth it to you, then do it. But I took it on with a promise of exposure that was quite great, like quite specific, but not properly put into writing. And it required a lot of work from me, and it required me to set aside some paid client work. And it was early in my career, and I really thought this is going to be very important for my portfolio, having this name of this company, shall remain nameless, having this company name that I can brag that I did work for this company. And this company bragging about me, because part of the whole arrangement was that I was not only going to be credited, I was going to be online, I was going to be in print, I was going to be blah, 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 blah. It was like too good to be true. And it was too good to be true, because anything that seems too good to be true is almost definitely too good to be true. And, I finished the project, incredibly fast turnaround, basically no thanks. The company fell off the face of the earth in terms of answering my emails after that. And when my work eventually came out and was shared with the world, my name was nowhere on it. Yes.
That sucks.
Yes. And I had not properly signed, a contract about it. I mean, these are the naive mistakes you make. And I bragged that I had made it, but I never got anything from it. What exposure if no one knows who did that work, right? So,
that sucks. In fact, like from a freelance angle, I will align with that tip of get proper contracts and get everything in writing at the start. Like 95% of the headaches I had as a freelancer probably came from doing that, and could have been alleviated instantly just having stuff in writing.
Yeah. One tiny little thing to add on to that is not setting deadlines or end dates to a project, because that's another thing that people often forget, and that has come back to bite me a lot, is that I'll tell people we'll get started on a project, and then the client will fall off the face of the earth. And a year, sometimes 2 years later, they'll come back, even if I've been trying to email them, and they'll say, okay, I'm ready to finish this. well, I'm not ready. I don't have the time. I don't want to finish your project. But I didn't say anything about how the project needs to be finished in this time frame, or here's the schedule, or the price is going to change after X amount of time. So think about that.
Love that. Okay, so next question is from Megan. How do you feel in terms of branding yourself as a company versus an individual?
Good question. I wasn't able to see Matt's, but I'm going to watch the recording because I was prepping for this event. But
basically, Matt was positioning himself more as a company. Even when it was just him, he was kind of using the line of like, well, I employ some freelancers on a sporadic basis, which turns it from I to we for credibility, because he was trying to go after bigger clients. So he kind of needed that.
Right. Okay. So when I started my company, I named it a name, not my name. I named it a studio because I thought to myself, rightly, by the way, that if I one day wanted to expand beyond myself, it would be a lot easier if I was already branded with a name that wasn't just my own name, and that I had felt that it lended me credibility so that people might not know right away that I'm just one person. As my career progressed and I niched, specifically my niche became earlier on an author. As soon as I wrote a book, I realized people are looking up my name because they have my book and they can't find me. Or they can find me, but they find my company and then they think, is that the exact same person as this author? And so it became clear for me personally that I actually wanted to become that my company was me and I am my company and my name is my company. That was important for me, but it really came about as being the author of books specifically. That said, I will also say that earlier in my career, I really felt a pressure that creative freelancing was a stepping stone. I felt this sense that you should be striving for something more, creating a company, making a studio or agency. I saw lots of people doing that and I admired them, but I never wanted to do that. And I found myself feeling this, like, for years, this sense of like, am I ever going to take the leap, right? And like go to the next step. And then I just had a revelation one day, like, I don't want that step and I'm never going to take it because I don't want it and I wouldn't be a good boss. Like, I don't want to be someone's boss. So I became really happy to just be me.
Yeah. And I love the self-awareness there. Like, some people would make horrible managers or hate being a manager. And in fact, most people, like, it's kind of a weird thing to do. Like, you know how many creatives I know, Molly, that feel like they have to go down that path and then they do it and they feel miserable because all they're doing is managing people and they don't get to create anything?
I know tons of my peers who've gone down that path, and I'm very thankful, that I didn't. It would have been a mistake for me.
Yeah, love that. Okay, next most popular question is from Senk, who asks, do you make special contracts for each project, or do you have kind of pre-formatted contracts you use over and over again?
I have pretty contracts. I mean,
like you use the same contracts for more or less every project.
Yeah. And I'm really careful.
Where did you get them? Did you employ a lawyer or use templates you purchased? That's not fair. We don't get that. The rest of us.
Okay, but can I do like specific shout outs? There's a company called The Contract Shop that's a friend of mine, but she actually does a really good job. She makes some contracts. Like, you can find one specifically for calligraphers if you want, but also self-bragging. In my book, The Calligrapher's Business Handbook, I do actually have a section at the end where it's not an actual contract, but it's basically a bullet list of everything that I include in my calligraphy contracts, specifically pertaining to calligraphy, and what's important to look for in a contract and what kind of contracts never to sign. But yeah, I mean, I have a template that almost never changes for certain types of jobs because lots of jobs at the heart of it are really similar to each other. But bigger jobs that are with bigger companies, usually it's them giving me the contract and me having to either, edit it or whatever, or give my feedback, or something like that. Like, I can't go to my publisher and say, here's my contract. They just laugh at me. So yeah, for individuals, it's basically a template.
Great. Perfect answer. Next question is from Ashley, who says, do you have recommendations for how to get started teaching calligraphy classes to others? It's another good question. You guys are on fire today.
Yes. Let's talk in like pre-lockdown first. No, just in general. Teaching, when I started teaching, I started with private tutoring because, I really wanted to make sure I could teach it. I had done a lot of like working on answering FAQs and writing blog posts to put in writing the educational content that a class would convey. But teaching it out loud and helping someone guiding their hand or whatever is a completely different ballgame. So I started offering private tutoring in Los Angeles, where I lived at the time. And even nowadays, you can do that via Zoom. I mean, it's so much easier now. So you can do, offer private lessons. And if you've never taught calligraphy, I would highly recommend starting with private lessons, because you're going to realize problems that people encounter that you maybe never had, and so you just can't even predict. And you don't want to have a whole classroom of people who have those questions for you arising all at once. So there's absolutely no replacement for private lessons and like what it can teach you. That's a great example of something you could do for free or for a discount, because you're getting something out of it. You're learning to teach while they're learning calligraphy. Right. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a really great way to get started. And then beyond that, if you have super happy pupils, have them write you testimonials, right? And clients too, every time that you do a project where your client is really happy and you're really proud of the work, have them just write you a couple sentences. And then you can start to build your marketing around teaching, where you have these people you've already taught and you can show before and afters of their work or whatever. And you can start to build larger classes.
So to kind of boil that down, I guess you're saying teach via content, teach via one-on-one paid students, and potentially do some for free as well. And just to add to that answer from Molly, I've done all of these things personally. Like when I first started doing group coaching and that kind of thing, I did it for free at the start because I'd never done it. And I was like, I don't really know how this works. So I did that. And then to your point, I created success stories and testimonials, which you then can leverage when you go on to do it bigger and better. And you learn so much from the process, you can refine how you teach. But I do think content is really underrated. So there's a lot to be said. Like, we're super comfortable talking like this now, right, Molly? And we've got a live audience, we've got hundreds of people and so on. But when you do it for the first time, that's where you're a bit awkward and it can be uncomfortable. So I think, go live on Instagram, go live on YouTube, listen to your audience. If you're on Instagram, message all your followers if you're putting out calligraphy and teaching content, and say, what pain points do you have? What questions do you have? And then go make content about their answers. So you're kind of getting this constant feedback loop, and you're starting to pick up on patterns in terms of common pain points and, areas of weakness. And so if you do that a lot and you're used to going live and interacting with an audience, suddenly if you're on a Zoom with 10 students, it's a lot more comfortable. And if you get a question, you've already answered it 40 times in Instagram lives and, content and that kind of thing, right? So you're so comfortable to give the answer. And this is what happened. Like when I went and spoke in Birmingham with Ian Barnard, and we did a Q&A at the end of our kind of group session. And there were 100 people there firing random questions. We had no idea what they were going to be. Every single question I had probably already answered 10 times because I'd pumped out so much content. And I would have freaked out if someone threw a question. I was like, oh my God, I've got no idea. Like, I don't know what to say. But I was like, I've literally answered that like last week for the 10th time. So
100%, 100%. And I will just add lastly to that when it comes to calligraphy, if you're talking about teaching like literal ink on paper calligraphy, you're also, there's the added challenge that it's a super frustrating thing for most people to be learning, right? So when you're teaching beginners, presumably you have been a beginner once yourself, and so you'll approach it with grace that, of course, but you're gonna deal with people who are quite frustrated. And so learning the skill of really helping people through something that is like really frustrating at first. And a lot of people come with the expectation that they're going to be, it's going to be much simpler. So really like managing people's expectations and keeping them inspired and coming up with your own exercises that are like really geared toward beginners. That's its own thing, even separate from how you can talk and describe the various elements that you're trying to teach.
Yeah.
Private tutoring and goes a long way.
It does. And, we know how this works. When we've included you, Molly, in our, Procreate events and lettering events, I'm asking you a question because I can see the audience care about it. The second I'm done asking the question, like, but how do you do that end flourish? You immediately jump in with the perfect answer and immediately demonstrate. And I know it's because you've already had that question 30 times before and you've demonstrated it hundreds of times. I can see that. You're not like figuring it out. You already know the answer. And that's the beauty of it. Yeah.
I mean, yes, I've done. It's hard to surprise me with questions for learning the type of calligraphy that I teach, but ask me to teach a kind of calligraphy. I have to start again from scratch with tutoring of, something I've never taught before. So.
Love it. Okay, so this is a question from Alex, who simply says, how can we better our watercolor brush lettering technique? Are there any tips to improve it?
It would be pretty much a similar answer to a lot of different lettering styles. Find wonderful teachers. Here on Design Cuts, I know that there are even like a lot of teachers who teach even in Procreate and not, on paper necessarily, but a lot of like the tidbits that teachers share for lettering that's even digital can actually also apply like to ink on paper or paint on paper designs, because a lot of it is about layout and like design theory and things like that. But I would just also say to look at the work of artists that you really like with a critical, questioning eye. So we very often look at the work of someone that we like and we think, I wish that I could make that. I'll never be good enough to make that. I don't even know how they did that, right? So pause, don't scroll past, and say, what do I like about it? I like how the colors flow together in an ombre effect. I like that it's all lowercase. I like that the spacing between the letters is wide or not uniform. Ask yourself, like, what makes you like it? Why do you like that more than another example of watercolor lettering that you saw before? And then look at your own work and say, okay, so what is my letter spacing like? Well, I liked how theirs was not uniform. Let me try making mine less uniform.
What do you think about replicating it? So if there's a piece you love, trying to replicate it and be like, why doesn't mine look as good? So it's that critical eye, but kind of comparing theirs and yours.
Yeah, that's an excellent form of practice. I mean, of course, as long as you never claim credit for it, it's an excellent.
Yeah, like don't post it publicly, but in private, like.
Yeah, that's a great way to practice.
Perfect. Well, Molly, I want to say a tremendously big thank you for joining me today. A little bit of a different session from your regular wonderful lettering, but such great insights. And I want to thank you for your honesty as much as anything, as well as your expertise, because I really feel like you opened up and gave the real answers today. It wasn't surface level. It wasn't disingenuous. It wasn't glossy. It was pretty raw at points, but I think that's what people need to hear. It's the truth. And that's, really what we believe in here at DC. So thank you for being awesome as always.
Well, thank you guys for really good questions. Some of them were challenging and made me think. So that's always good. I like to have that variety.
Yeah. All right. Have a great day, everyone. Bye.